The cold emptiness of space, a vast and uncaring expanse, stretches out before us. For millennia, humanity has been scattered across the stars, a relic of a once mighty civilization that thrived on Earth, our home planet. But that home is long gone. Earth, the cradle of humanity, fell, destroyed by forces beyond our understanding. The silence of our lost world echoes throughout the universe, a reminder of our ancient downfall. Yet, in the void of that silence, a new chapter is about to unfold. After 3,000 years of wandering the stars, we are not the same people we once were. The survivors of Earth, those few who managed to escape the cataclysm, have evolved, adapted to life in space. We've built great fleets, mastered technologies that once seemed impossible, and become something more than human. We are no longer just survivors. We are something new, and we're ready to return, not just to our home, but to exact the ultimate revenge. The story begins on a distant world, far from Earth, where the last remnants of humanity are gathered, the planet that has become a sanctuary for those who fled. The place where the knowledge of the fall of Earth is kept in dark, secret archives. Only the most senior and trusted of the human fleet know the full truth of what happened to Earth, and they guard it jealously. But one truth remains known to all. Humanity was betrayed. The very beings that we once thought of as allies, the ones we trusted with our lives, turned on us. They tore apart our civilization, leaving us with nothing but the ashes of our past. Now, a new generation of humans, born in the stars, is preparing to confront those who are responsible for our fall. They've grown up with tales of Earth, of its beauty and its destruction. To them, Earth isn't just a planet, it's a symbol of everything they've lost, and everything they will reclaim. Among them is a leader, someone who is more than just a figurehead. Descendant of the ancient rulers of Earth, their bloodline holds the key to our future. This leader has spent their life studying the history of the fall, gathering allies, and preparing for the day when humanity would rise again. The time for preparation is over. The day of reckoning has arrived. But the road to revenge is not an easy one. The enemies who once destroyed us are not merely waiting for our return. They are ready for us. They've watched us, tracked us, and prepared for this moment. They have their own fleets, their own advanced technologies, and they will stop at nothing to ensure that humanity never rises again. Tensions are rising as the fleets of humans begin to assemble. The leader of the rebellion stands on the command deck of the flagship, staring at the vastness of space. The stars seem so close, yet so far. The memories of Earth, the sun setting over the oceans, the sound of wind through the trees, the warmth of a summer day, seem like a dream. But that dream is about to become a reality. The enemy knows we are coming. They are preparing for war, but they underestimate one thing. They underestimate the strength of humanity. We may have fallen once, but we will not fall again. We've learned, we've grown, and now we are ready. The leader's voice cuts through the tense silence of the command deck, calling out orders to the crew. The ships begin to move, leaving the safety of their hidden sanctuary and heading toward the home they once knew. The journey will be perilous, and the risks are enormous. There will be battles, losses, and sacrifices along the way. But we have no choice. We must reclaim what was ours. As the ships exit the system and enter the vast unknown, the leader glances at the star map, the coordinates set for Earth's last known location. It's been a long time since anyone's seen Earth. The galaxy has changed. Some say it's uninhabitable now, a desolate wasteland, forever scared by the destruction. But others believe it still holds secrets, ancient technologies, and weapons that could turn the tide of this war. The fleet jumps into hyperspace, and the stars stretch into long lines as they speed toward the past. It is said that time has a way of changing everything. But as humanity moves closer to their long-awaited vengeance, one thing is certain: no matter what happens when they return, the galaxy will never be the same again. The darkness of space is thick, the silence deafening, as the humans hurtle toward their destiny. There is no turning back now. Every step forward brings them closer to Earth, to their past, to the final confrontation with those who brought about their destruction. And with it, promise of ultimate revenge. But what awaits them when they arrive? What remnants of their lost home will they find? And what new dangers will they face, even from within their own ranks? Only time will tell. The leader stares out into the void, their heart pounding with anticipation. The fate of humanity rests in their hands. As the stars grow closer, the weight of their ancestors' loss hangs heavy, and a single thought echoes in their mind. It's time to take back what's ours. As the fleet raced through the dark expanse of space, time seemed to lose its meaning. Each jump into hyperspace took them one step closer to their destination, to Earth. But each jump also felt like it stretched the distance between the humans and their lost home. The tension in the command room of the flagship was palpable. The crew worked in near silence, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of monitors and consoles. There was no room for mistakes. Not now, not when everything they had fought for was hanging in the balance. The leader of the fleet, a seasoned commander born from the ashes of Earth's destruction, stood at the bridge, hands clasped behind their back. Their mind was heavy with thoughts of Earth, its history, its fall, and the endless cycle of struggle humanity had endured. No one on board the flagship had lived through the fall of Earth, but they had all heard the stories, passed down through generations. The ancient texts, the old archives, the tales of a time when humanity had been the masters of the world, when Earth was a paradise teeming with life. It was hard to imagine such a time now. The only Earth they knew was the one burned into their collective memory. An Earth that had been reduced to rubble, its once majestic cities now nothing more than a faded dream. But the memories of Earth were more than just a backdrop. They were a rallying cry, a call to action. They had been scattered across the galaxy, forced to survive in foreign worlds, relying on scraps of technology to rebuild what had been lost. But now, they were on the cusp of reclaiming their legacy. The leader's thoughts drifted back to the events that had brought them to this point. The fall of Earth hadn't been a natural disaster. It hadn't been a cosmic event beyond anyone's control. No, it was far worse than that. The enemy, the ones responsible for Earth's destruction, had once been humanity's allies, beings from another star system, so similar to humans in some ways, yet so different in others. They had shared their technology, their knowledge, and their promise of peace. For a time, it had seemed like a new golden age for humanity. But that was before the betrayal. The betrayal had come without warning. Earth had been struck by a force so powerful, so precise, that it shattered entire continents. Cities fell in an instant, millions of lives were lost, and humanity was left in ruins. The enemy, the ones they had trusted, had turned on them with a vengeance. Their motives remained unclear, their reasons buried in the shadows of a war that humanity hadn't even seen coming. The fleet had barely escaped the destruction, scattering across the galaxy, leaving behind only memories and a thirst for revenge. As the flagship glided through hyperspace, the leader couldn't help but wonder what had happened to those who had caused their suffering. Were they still out there, waiting for them? Had they, too, changed over the millennia? The leader's hand tightened around the cold metal of the railing as they pushed the thoughts aside. There was no time for doubt, not now. Revenge was not a matter of what had happened in the past. It was a matter of what would happen next. The hum of the engines was the only sound as the flagship continued its journey through the stars. But even in the quiet, the leader felt the weight of the crew's eyes upon them. They had all followed this path, but now, with Earth in sight, the stakes had never been higher. Some of the crew were born among the stars, never having known Earth at all. To them, it was a place of legends, mythical world of unimaginable beauty and devastation. They had grown up hearing stories of the past, of a time when humans had walked on Earth's surface and built great cities. The older members of the crew, those who had lived through the chaos, remembered the horrors of the fall all too well. The scars they carried were not just physical, they were emotional, spiritual, a constant reminder of the cost of survival. The flagship's captain, a grizzled veteran who had led the fleet through countless battles, stood next to the leader, his gaze fixed on the forward viewport. He was the one who had seen the worst of what humanity could endure. He was the one who had witnessed the destruction firsthand. His eyes were haunted, but his resolve was unwavering. "We're close," he said, his voice low but steady. "We've made it this far. Earth is almost within reach." The leader nodded, a flicker of gratitude crossing their face. The captain had been a pillar of strength, a constant presence throughout their journey. Without him, the fleet might have fractured long ago. But even the captain knew that this was no ordinary mission. This was a quest for redemption, for justice, for the ultimate vengeance. It wasn't just about reclaiming Earth, it was about making the enemy pay for what they had done. In the depths of the ship, far from the bridge, the rest of the crew continued their work. Engineers monitored the systems, ensuring that the ship's engines were functioning at full capacity. The medical bay was ready for any casualties that might occur in the upcoming battles. The war room was filled with tactical officers and strategists, poring over data, planning their next move. Everyone knew that the final leg of the journey would be the most dangerous, but no one was willing to turn back now. The journey was nearly over, and the unknowns of what lay ahead only added to the intensity of the moment. The fleet had passed through hostile territories, avoided detection by enemy forces, and navigated treacherous space anomalies. But Earth was their ultimate goal, and they would stop at nothing to reclaim it. The leader could feel the weight of the decision they had made, the decision to bring this fleet back to Earth. It had not been an easy choice, but it was the only one. The people needed hope. They needed something to fight for, and Earth was that symbol, the anchor that could unite humanity's fractured forces. It was more than just a planet. It was a testament to what had been lost, and a promise that they would never forget. But as they approached their destination, the leader couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The signs had been there all along. The strange interference in the communications network, the cryptic warnings from deep space probes, and the unsettling quiet of the galactic frontier. They had expected to find Earth a desolate wasteland, planet torn apart by the war. But what if it wasn't? What if the enemy had been waiting for them, lying in wait for this moment? "Captain," the leader said, their voice tight with unease, "do you sense it too?" The captain looked at them, his expression grim. "Something's wrong. I can feel it in my bones." Just then, the communications officer's voice crackled over the intercom. "Commander, we've detected an anomaly. Something ahead." The leader turned sharply. "What kind of anomaly?" The officer's voice hesitated. "It's hard to say. A signal, or perhaps a field, emitting from the coordinates where Earth was last known to be." A shiver ran down the leader's spine. "Is it the enemy?" "We don't know," came the reply. "It's unlike anything we've encountered before. It's disturbing." The flagship's engines slowed as they neared the coordinates. The crew braced for whatever awaited them, knowing that the moment of truth had arrived. The vast emptiness of space was suddenly filled with tension, every sensor, every piece of equipment, scanning for the unknown. The silence of the void seemed to stretch on forever, broken only by the soft hum of the engines and the occasional clink of machinery. Then, without warning, the flagship was jolted by a violent shockwave. The ship shuddered, and alarms blared throughout the vessel. The lights flickered, and the crew scrambled to respond. "What was that?" the leader shouted, gripping the railing as the ship rocked. "We've been hit," the captain answered, his voice tense. "It's coming from the anomaly. We need to power down our systems, or we'll be blinded by whatever that is." The leader nodded, quickly issuing orders to the crew. As the ship fought to maintain stability, the tension on board reached its breaking point. Whatever lay ahead, humanity was about to face its greatest test yet. They had come for revenge, for justice, but the galaxy had its own plans. As the flagship hurtled toward Earth's coordinates, the leader's heart pounded with anticipation. Would they find the remnants of their home, or something far worse? Something darker, more powerful than they could ever have imagined. The fleet was now closer than ever before. The final battle, the final confrontation, was drawing near, but the real question lingered. Would humanity survive to see the dawn of a new era? Or would they become nothing more than another casualty in the endless war for survival? The answer, like everything else, remained a mystery. The flagship shuddered once more, sending a ripple of anxiety through the crew. The strange anomaly continued to pulse, its force growing stronger with each passing moment. Outside the viewport, space was no longer the empty, tranquil void it had been moments ago. Now, it was alive with tension, crackling with a dark energy that seemed to reach into the very soul of those aboard the ship. It felt as though the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The leaders stood at the bridge, their mind racing. The captain's face was grim, his hands gripping the console, but even he couldn't hide the flicker of unease in his eyes. "Prepare for another shockwave," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. The crew scrambled to secure everything, but there was no denying the fear that had settled over the flagship. The anomaly ahead had taken on a life of its own, pulsating like a beating heart. A faint hum reverberated through the metal walls of the ship, almost like a whisper, an invitation, or a warning. "All systems are stabilizing," the chief engineer reported, though his voice was strained. "But I don't know how long we can maintain course, Commander." The leader's mind was a whirlwind, their thoughts flickering between strategy and survival. "We don't have a choice. We push forward," they ordered, trying to mask their own uncertainty. They had come this far, they couldn't falter now. The stakes were too high. The fleet advanced cautiously, navigating around the growing disturbance. The stars outside the viewport twisted and warped, their light bending unnaturally, as though the laws of physics themselves were being bent by the strange force ahead. "Commander," the communications officer called out, her voice high with panic. "We're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the anomaly. But it's not like any signal we've encountered before." The leader's heart skipped a beat. The thought of receiving anything from the enemy was unsettling. But this was different. The transmission crackled to life, but it wasn't a voice they recognized. It was static at first, garbled mess of interference, before finally forming words that sent chills down their spine. "Welcome back, humans." The words echoed across the bridge, and for a brief, horrifying moment, no one moved. The very air seemed to thicken, weighed down by an unseen force. It was the enemy, but not as they had expected. The voice was distorted, almost alien in its tone, yet eerily familiar. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving nothing but the harsh crackling of static, but the feeling of dread lingered. "What was that?" the captain growled, his eyes narrowed. "They know we're here. They know we're coming for them." The leader clenched their fists, the weight of their responsibility bearing down harder than ever. They had prepared for many things on this journey: battles, losses, even the possibility of failure. But this was something entirely new. And yet, in the back of their mind, a cold, quiet realization began to take shape. They had been expecting a war, a battle to reclaim their home. But what if this was something more? What if the enemy had been waiting for them not just to return, but to walk into a trap? The flagship's crew could feel the shift in the air as the ship drew closer to the anomaly's epicenter. They were no longer in familiar space. The stars had started to disappear, replaced by a swirling darkness that seemed to reach out and swallow everything around them. The familiar hum of the engines faltered, and for a brief, terrifying moment, everything fell into silence. The sense of impending doom was suffocating. Suddenly, the ship lurched forward, as though being pulled by an unseen force. Systems blinked in and out of power, alarms blared, and the entire vessel groaned under the pressure. Crew members scrambled to keep their stations, shouting commands, trying to make sense of what was happening. The leader's heart raced, their pulse quickening with each passing second. "Status report." The leader barked. "We're being dragged into the core of the anomaly." The helmsman shouted, his voice cracking with fear. "We can't control it. We're losing power." The leader's mind raced. They had not expected this. The enemy's trap was not just a fleet waiting to engage them. It was a force that controlled the very fabric of space itself. And they had walked right into it. "Hold on," the leader shouted, gripping the railing in front of them as the ship continued to be pulled forward. "We can't turn back now. Push forward. We're too close." But with each passing moment, the sense of hope grew dimmer. The flagship, once a symbol of humanity's resilience, now felt fragile and insignificant against the dark, vast power that was swallowing them. The ship trembled violently as the core of the anomaly loomed ahead. In the distance, a faint light, sickly green, began to glow, illuminating the darkness. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. The crew was fighting to hold the ship together, but their efforts seemed futile, as if their resistance was nothing more than a whisper against a raging storm. The mysterious force continued to grow stronger, and the flagship's systems failed one by one. The once controlled chaos on the bridge was now spiraling into pure panic. "Commander," the chief engineer cried, "the hull is starting to fracture. We can't hold out much longer." The leader's mind raced. Every option seemed to have been exhausted. They had to make a decision. They had to act now, before they were completely overwhelmed. "We're boarding the anomaly," the leader said, their voice resolute despite the terror creeping in. "Prepare the escape pods. We're not going down without a fight." They were far from their intended destination, but it was clear that Earth was no longer the primary concern. The enemy was here, right in front of them, and they had come for something far more dangerous than a simple confrontation. The anomaly, the signal, the force, it was all part of something far darker, something far older, and if they didn't act fast, it would consume them all. The tension reached its breaking point as the flagship was pulled toward the core of the anomaly. The strange green light grew brighter, flickering in and out, like a dying star. The crew's anxiety was palpable. The thought of entering whatever lay beyond the anomaly was terrifying, but there was no other choice. "We're not going to survive this unless we face it head-on," the leader said, voice cold with determination. "We'll find out what the enemy really wants, and we'll make them regret ever crossing us." As the flagship drew nearer to the heart of the anomaly, the very air seemed to warp around them. The crew, standing in the eye of this cosmic storm, felt the pull of fate tighten its grip. The universe itself seemed to be holding its breath. Every fiber of the leaders being screamed for them to pull back, to retreat to the safety of the stars. But that was no longer an option. They had come too far. Earth, their home, their legacy, it was out of reach. But the final confrontation was close. And the moment to fight back, to take control of their destiny, was now. The flagship shuddered once again as it entered the core of the anomaly, and the crew held their breath. Would they make it through this, or would this be the end of everything they had fought for? The answer was still hidden in the vast, unknowable depths ahead, and the tension reached a boiling point as they drew ever closer to their destiny. The flagship plunged deeper into the heart of the anomaly, the green light now blindingly bright, wrapping the ship in an eerie glow. The ship groaned, its hull bending and creaking under the immense pressure, and the crew braced themselves for what was to come. The chaos in the command room was palpable. Alarms blared in every corner of the ship, and systems flickered on and off like a dying star. There was no way to tell what they were about to encounter, but everyone on board could feel it. They were crossing into a realm beyond their understanding. "All hands, brace for impact," the leader shouted, voice grim. But as soon as the words left their mouth, an unexpected, almost unnatural calm swept over the bridge. The green light ahead pulsed faster, as if the anomaly itself was reacting to the presence of the flagship. It was as though the ship was being sucked into something alive, something sentient, and the crew felt a deep, unsettling shift in the air around them. The temperature dropped sharply, and the once steady hum of the engines grew faint, replaced by a sound that was more like a whisper, an ancient disembodied murmur that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then, the impossible happened. The ship stopped moving. The hull of the flagship was frozen in place, suspended in midair by an unseen force. The crew scrambled at their stations, frantically checking their screens, but nothing responded. The ship was locked in the heart of the anomaly, and no one could explain why. The communications officer's voice trembled as she spoke. "Commander, we're not moving. We've lost all propulsion systems. It's like something's holding us here." The leader's stomach dropped. They knew they had crossed a threshold, but this was beyond anything they had prepared for. They had expected a battle, a final confrontation, but they hadn't accounted for this strange power, this anomaly that seemed to control everything around them. The captain's voice broke through the silence. It's like we're caught in a web. We can't break free. What the hell is going on?" Before the leader could respond, the walls of the command room seemed to ripple, as if the very fabric of reality was bending around them. The air felt thick, oppressive, like gravity itself was being manipulated. A low hum, like the sound of a distant engine, reverberated through the ship, but it wasn't a normal sound. It was something older, something alien. Then, in an instant, the anomaly twisted, sending a massive shockwave through the ship. The entire vessel rattled, shaking as though it was being torn apart from the inside. The crew stumbled, struggling to maintain their footing as consoles exploded in sparks. The ship groaned again, louder this time, as if it were alive, fighting against the force pulling it in. "We've lost communication with the rest of the fleet," shouted the communications officer, panic in her voice. "They're gone, Commander. We're isolated, completely cut off." The leader's mind raced. They had anticipated a confrontation with the enemy. But this was something else entirely. Something was manipulating their reality, and they didn't even know what it was. They had thought the anomaly was a trap, but now they weren't so sure. It seemed more like a living, breathing entity, something beyond their understanding, something ancient. The green light intensified, and suddenly, without warning, a massive shape appeared before them. It was enormous, immense, and it loomed in the center of the green glow. It was like a massive ship, but not one made of metal or stone. This structure, this thing, seemed to be made of the very fabric of space itself, its edges shifting and warping, like a mirage in the distance. Its surface flickered in and out of existence, like it was both there and not there at the same time. Is that the enemy?" the captain murmured, his voice barely audible. The leader could only stare, their heart pounding in their chest. This was not what they had expected. The ship, if it could even be called that, wasn't just an enemy. It was a mystery, a manifestation of something that couldn't possibly exist in the normal universe. "We need to move, now," the captain barked. But there was no escape. The ship was trapped, unable to maneuver, caught in the web of the anomaly. The massive structure before them began to pulse, sending out waves of energy that shook the flagship to its core. The green light turned almost blinding, and the voice, the same distorted voice from before, returned, but now it was clearer, louder. "You have come too late." The words reverberated through the ship, a deep, haunting tone that seemed to speak directly into the minds of the crew. The leader's blood ran cold. It wasn't just an alien species they were dealing with anymore. It was something far worse, something older, something beyond human comprehension. "What is this?" the leader whispered, barely able to comprehend what was happening. "What have we walked into?" The voice answered, its tone dripping with contempt. This is not a war you can win. You have been blind to the truth. The enemy you seek has already been consumed. The leader felt their heart race as the pieces began to fall into place. The enemy, the ones who had destroyed Earth, were not what they had thought. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a battle against something ancient, something that had been manipulating events from the shadows long before humanity ever set foot in the stars. The massive structure flickered once more, and the voice spoke again, colder this time. Your home was not lost to war. It was consumed by the hunger of the stars themselves. The cycle you are caught in is endless. The flagship's crew was silent, horror dawning on them as they realized the implications of those words. Earth, their home, had not fallen to an enemy fleet or a cosmic disaster. It had been destroyed, devoured, by something far more powerful, and it was not finished yet. The leader stumbled backward, grasping for answers they couldn't find. They had thought they were coming for revenge, that they could reclaim their home, but now the truth had become far darker. Earth wasn't just lost. It was the beginning of something far more terrifying, and they were standing in the middle of it. The ship began to tremble once more, the massive, shifting structure before them emitting a strange energy that felt like it was pulling at their very souls. The crew could feel the pressure building, a sense of doom pressing in from all sides. No, the leader whispered, their voice breaking. No, we're not done. We can still. But the words were cut off as the ship lurched forward, the green light flashing blindingly bright, and everything fell into chaos. The flagship was hurtling toward the massive structure, and the crew was helpless, trapped in a nightmare they hadn't been prepared for. The battle for survival was no longer a matter of fighting an enemy. It was about facing something far worse, a force that controlled time and space itself. As the ship raced toward the heart of the anomaly, the leader knew that whatever came next, there would be no turning back. The stakes had shifted beyond anything they could have imagined. The fate of humanity was no longer in their hands. It was now a matter of survival, and perhaps even that was in question. As the flagship approached the core of the anomaly, the tension was unbearable. No one knew what would happen when they collided with the alien structure. But one thing was certain: the fight for revenge had just become something much, much darker. The flagship was tearing through space, its engines sputtering and failing, unable to resist the overwhelming force pulling it toward the heart of the anomaly. The massive structure loomed larger and larger, its twisted form bending the fabric of reality around it. The crew had lost all sense of control. The green light surrounding them was blinding now, and the once steady hum of the ship had turned into a hollow, frantic whine. It felt as though they were being pulled into the very center of oblivion. "Brace yourselves," the leader shouted, gripping the console with all their strength. The walls of the ship shook violently, and the crew struggled to maintain their composure as the vessel's hull groaned under the strain. But even as the ship hurtled toward its destination, they could feel something change. The atmosphere around them shifted, growing heavier, more suffocating. The strange hum reverberated through their bones, and something inside the ship, something deep within the anomaly, was calling out to them. For the briefest of moments, everything seemed to stop. The flagship hung suspended, frozen in midair, as if time itself had stopped. The air on the bridge grew thick with an otherworldly pressure, and the crew held their breath, unsure of what to expect. The massive structure that had been before them now seemed even more immense, and it was no longer just a shape in the dark. It was alive. The very core of the anomaly pulsed, as though it were breathing, feeding off their fear. The voice returned, louder now, vibrating through the ship's very walls, echoing in the minds of every crew member. "You sought revenge, but there is no victory here. There is only awakening." The word sent a chill down the leader's spine. The voice was familiar, twisted with an ancient malice. It wasn't just the enemy they had been expecting. It was something far worse, something that had been here long before humanity ever set foot in the stars. The voice was not a species, not an alien race, but an entity, a living force, the same force that had destroyed Earth, the same force that had manipulated everything from the shadows. What do you want from us? The leader forced out, voice barely above a whisper. There was no bravado now, no confidence left. They had come for revenge, but what they faced was something that transcended everything they had known. The voice responded, its tone mocking and cold. You were never meant to return. You were never meant to survive. And then, in an instant, the ship was plunged into darkness. The lights flickered out, and the crew was thrown into chaos. The green light from the anomaly vanished, leaving only the suffocating blackness of the void. The ship's systems were gone. All communications severed. The flagship was adrift, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. The leader's heart hammered in their chest. The fear was overwhelming. Their crew was trapped, helpless, and they had no idea what was about to happen next. Suddenly, the voice, no, the entity, spoke again. But this time, it was not in the distant, distorted tones that had haunted them before. It was personal. It was inside their minds. You don't understand yet, do you? Your enemy was never those you thought to be your adversaries. The true enemy is the cycle, the inevitable, the hunger of the universe. You are just pawns, caught in the eternal struggle. The leader's blood ran cold as realization dawned on them. Everything had been a lie. Earth had not fallen due to a war, nor had it been destroyed by the conflict they had assumed. The destruction of their home, their entire civilization, was part of something far greater, far older. The cycle wasn't just about survival, it was about consumption. The universe was not just a cold, uncaring place. It was alive, and it was hungry. You were never meant to survive, the voice repeated, but now it was no longer mocking. It was almost mournful. But now you know the truth. You have always been part of the cycle. You will always be consumed, just as those before you. The flagship shuddered again, and suddenly, a terrible clarity filled the leader's mind. The voice wasn't just a warning. It was a statement of fact. Humanity had not returned to reclaim what was lost. They had returned because they had always been a part of the inevitable cycle. Their arrival, their quest for revenge, was all a part of the plan, a plan that stretched beyond their comprehension, beyond their control. The ship's hull groaned, and the leader could feel it, the pull of the anomaly, the gravity of the ancient force that had been manipulating them. But there was no escaping it. The anomaly, the entity, had already won. And then, in the blink of an eye, the flagship was torn apart. The crew was thrown into darkness, into the cold embrace of space. The ship shattered like glass, sending debris scattering in every direction. The leader, still gripping the edge of the console, was thrown against the wall, their vision spinning as the force of the explosion slammed into them. They barely had time to register the chaos around them. The screams of their crew, the shrill alarms, the lights flickering on and off, before everything went black. Time seemed to slow. When the leader's vision cleared, they were no longer on the flagship. They were somewhere else. The void of space was gone, replaced by an infinite darkness. They could see nothing but the endless expanse, and yet it felt as though the space around them was pulsing. Alive. The entity spoke again, this time directly into their mind. You sought revenge, but now you understand. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. Suddenly, everything clicked. The truth was impossible to deny, but it was undeniable all the same. Humanity hadn't been destroyed by an enemy. They had been consumed by something far older, a force that had always been there, waiting. They were part of an endless cycle, a feeding loop where civilizations rose, flourished, and were devoured by the universe itself. And now, it was their turn. But just as the realization settled in, a shockwave of energy exploded outward, tearing through the darkness. The leader could feel it, the force of the anomaly, the entity, beginning to shift. It was no longer just observing. It was changing. In that moment, the leader felt something they hadn't expected. A surge of energy, of power. It was fleeting, but it was enough. The anomaly, the entity, was not invincible. There was a way to fight it, a way to break the cycle. But before the leader could act, before they could process the possibility of survival, everything went silent. The darkness was absolute. And then, in a flash of light, the world around them disappeared. The final twist came not with an explosion or a dramatic confrontation. It came with a single, quiet truth. The entity had known humanity would return, but they had also known one more thing. There would always be those who would fight back. Because as long as there was life, there was resistance. The cycle may be inevitable, but it was not without challenge. The question was no longer whether humanity could survive. It was whether the universe itself could endure the consequences of their defiance. And as the light faded, leaving nothing but the silence of the void, the final answer remained hidden in the dark. The silence that followed was unbearable. The kind of silence that stretched on, unbroken, as though the universe itself had exhaled its final breath. It was a cold, empty void where time had no meaning. The leader could feel the weight of everything that had just happened pressing down on them. But in that crushing stillness, something unexpected occurred. A flicker. It was so faint at first that they weren't sure if they had imagined it, but as the seconds stretched on, the sensation grew. Pulse. Beat. A rhythm in the darkness that somehow felt familiar. The leader took a shaky breath, their eyes searching the void, hoping, wishing, that there was something, anything, out there. A sign. A message. A hint of hope. And then, in the infinite expanse of nothingness, faint blue light appeared. It shimmered like the distant star they had once known. The leader's heart skipped a beat, uncertain if they were witnessing some kind of hallucination, but the light grew brighter, more distinct. It was real. Without fully understanding why, the leader instinctively moved toward it, drawn by the same force that had led them to this place. As they drew closer to the light, they felt a strange warmth. The cold of the void seemed to fade, and the silence, though still present, no longer felt so suffocating. The light grew, revealing itself to be more than just a simple flash. It was a doorway. It wasn't a doorway in the traditional sense. There were no walls, no frame, no edges to define it. It was a rift in the very fabric of space itself. A swirling vortex of energy that bent the space around it, pulling the leader toward it with a magnetic force. And in that moment, the leader realized something. This wasn't just a way back. It was a chance. A chance to change the cycle. A chance to break free. Before the leader could act, deep voice echoed in their mind once again, its tone as familiar and dreadful as before. You think you can escape it. You think you can defy the hunger of the stars. You have always been part of the cycle, and you always will be. But this time, the voice was weaker. It no longer held the same power, the same control it once did. The leader could sense it. This entity, this ancient force, was weakening. It was still there, still watching, but it had been wounded. Its grip on the universe was slipping. The leader stood at the threshold of the rift, their mind racing, heart pounding. They knew what they had to do. This was their chance, not just to survive, but to fight back, to take control of the very force that had destroyed Earth and every civilization before them. The leaders stepped forward. The moment they did, the world around them fractured. Everything that had come before, the flagship, the anomaly, the cosmic force, disappeared in a burst of light. The leader found themselves not in the dark void anymore, but standing in a vast, familiar place. Earth, or at least, it seemed like Earth. It was a world full of life, of promise. A place where humans had once lived and thrived. But this Earth, this new world, was different. Gone were the ruins of the old world. Gone were the scars left by the destructive force of the cycle. Instead, there was only growth. The earth was teeming with life, lush and vibrant, as if time had reversed itself. The leader looked around in disbelief. How could this be possible? Had they somehow changed the past? Had they rewritten history? But as the leader took another step forward, a figure emerged from the shadows. The figure was familiar, though they couldn't quite place it at first. As it stepped into the light, the leader's heart skipped a beat. It was a face they had seen in the depths of their memory, a face from before everything had gone wrong. The figure spoke softly, almost as if it had been waiting for this moment. "You've done it," the figure said. "You've broken the cycle." The leader blinked, confused. "What do you mean? How is this possible? How did I?" The figure smiled. "It wasn't just you. You weren't the first to challenge the cycle, and you won't be the last. There are others, always others, who will fight, who will rise up, defy the inevitable, and force the universe to change." The leader's mind raced, trying to grasp the enormity of what was happening. But how? How did I end this? The figure's smile faded, replaced by something more somber. "It wasn't easy. It never is. But you did it." The cycle had been consuming civilizations, devouring them one by one. But you, and those like you, have the power to break it. The power to fight back. As the leader took in these words, a flood of emotions overwhelmed them. The anger they had carried with them for so long, the desire for revenge against the enemy that had destroyed Earth, had faded into something deeper. It wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about change, about standing against the universe's endless hunger and forcing it to bend. "You've given humanity a second chance," the figure said, their voice filled with quiet pride. "But the fight is far from over. You will face challenges, and there will be others who try to stop you. But you now have something they don't: hope, the belief that the cycle can be broken. And that belief is powerful." The leader nodded, the weight of their responsibility settling on their shoulders. They had come to this place to seek revenge, to reclaim what was lost. But they had found something far greater: the realization that humanity's survival was not just about defeating an enemy. It was about defying the inevitable, about fighting for a future, for a chance at something better. As the leader looked around at the world that had once been destroyed, they knew that this was only the beginning. The cycle had been broken, but it could return. It would take everything humanity had to stop it for good. But with this new understanding, with the hope they had found, they knew one thing for certain: they were ready. And with that, the leader turned to face the horizon, the future stretching before them. They were no longer a solitary warrior seeking revenge. They were a part of something much larger. A movement, a rebellion against the universe's hunger. It was a fight for the future, for the very survival of every living being. The sky above them began to change. The blue light that had once been a distant flicker now shimmered like a beacon, a sign of the new path humanity was forging. The leader walked forward, every step a promise to the future. And in the distance, they could feel it. A new beginning. The cycle was broken, but the battle had only just begun. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun. And as the leader moved toward the future, they knew one thing for sure: humanity's fight was far from over. But they would never stop, because as long as there was life, there was hope. And with that, the universe had been forced to learn a lesson it could never forget. No force, no hunger, no cosmic entity could ever erase the will of humanity to survive. And the story, the real story, had just begun.